All right, I wanted to do a quick overview comparison, not full review, of the 3 larger frame cold steel triad lock folders that I own. Now, they're all the same steel, S35VN, and they all have G10 scales, and they're all a very similar size within a certain range. And I've had them for different lengths of time, so that's also going to play into it. What do I like about each one and maybe not like so much about each one? And have I done any modifications? I'm also going to do this review without my brace on. Okay, if you guys have been following my channel since January of 2020 when I got hurt and did the damage and lost the function, you know I've been working pretty hard on PT/OT, rehab, straight up healing. Trying to get as much of that hand back as I can and work around the rest of it. Well, one thing I have not been able to do for months and months and months is that. So, is it as strong and smooth and quick as it used to be? No. Is it pain-free? No. But I can do it. So, let's call this a celebration and get into the knives. Let's start with the one I've had the longest, 12 years now. I selected it above, well, a lot of the other designs that were available at the time. It's the one that appealed to me the most, and that was the cold steel American Lawman. Why did I pick this one? Well, I liked a lot of things about the shape and the ergonomics of it. It's got a slightly swept forward drop point blade. I really like drop points. It's kind of one of my favorite knife designs. Also, from some of the other knife reviews you've seen, I have a thing about these finger choils. Okay, if it's got this extra finger choil, especially on a bigger knife that lets me choke up, that's extra appealing for me to be able to use the knife for closer, finer work. So I like that. Now, there's no jimping on the back of the blade, but there is some on the grip there, so it gives me a little bit of purchase with the thumb, which is cool. But it doesn't feel too bad to have my thumb on the back of the blade. But an extra bonus of that finger choil on this knife for me is actually about safety. The triad lock is a very strong back lock. So on the newer models, and take a look at some of the newer ones, it can be pretty tense and difficult, especially on the smaller knives that are lighter and there's not a lot of grip girth. I'll review some of those later. Can be quite a bear to get closed sometimes until they break in. And this one's broken in. It's gotten a lot smoother, and you can actually hear that there's not a lot of scrape or grit in it. It's very smooth now after so many years, but nothing's really loosened up. It's stayed strong, tough, tight, precise. So that's all good. Now, the safety aspect of it. Well, you can actually press down on that lock to release the blade and flip it closed. Okay? Now, if it goes too fast, you'll notice that you might not be able to get your finger out of the way, and it could close on your finger unexpectedly. Well, that finger choil completely protects you. So that's a nice extra safety bonus. I have never cut myself closing this knife on my fingers by accident. So that's just an extra something special. Now, compared to the other knives I'm going to show you, this is a hollow ground blade. The other ones are flat saber grinds. That makes this blade lighter, and you may or may not like hollow ground knives. This one's held up just fine. I've had to sharpen it, well, many times, but it holds an edge pretty good, cuts really well. Just very, very useful blade shape. Some things that I had to change. Well, first of all, if you go shopping for this, and you can still find them, they go for about $90, $95 if you can get one on sale. You'll notice immediately if you see a picture of one, or if you happen to have one, you'll notice it's not the same color as this. It comes with the cold steel blackened finish, which was really popular back then. I don't see it as much on some of the newer designs. There's probably a reason for that. The reason it's not on mine is pretty much immediately it failed. And I'm not talking about abusive cutting. I'm talking out of the box, cutting plastic packaging and cardboard, the finish scraped right off. And then I could go in there and scrape more of it off with my fingernail. Now, not the entire blade, but spots of it. That surfacing was not adhered to the steel very well. It was like spray paint or nail polish. So I took it apart, stripped it off. Now that also took off all the markings because they were basically part of the surface coloration. But yeah, whatever. What else did I do to it? Well, let's talk about the shape of this grip, because this is actually very different, even though it's still G10, than the other two I'm going to show you. Flat scales. So it's pretty slim. Carries really well, but there's some issues about that. One issue about that is it, compared to the other ones, has a very coarse kind of checkered pattern on that G10. That makes it really grippy, but it's also really grippy on your pants. So getting it in and out of your pocket is like pulling a coarse file in and out of your pocket. It's very rough, very grabby, going both ways, and can tear up your pants. So not the smoothest knife to get out and put away. So you might consider that. Now, one of the really cool things though about G10 is you can reshape it easily. Sanding, filing, power tools, whatever you happen to like working with, it's a really easy medium to work with, especially if there are no steel scales in the way. And yeah, this does not have prominent liners. So I did slightly round some of the short edges on the squareness of that profile. Just a little, to make it that much more comfortable. But that's all I did. I stripped off the finish and I rounded a couple of edges, and that's it. 12 years, this knife has gone with me pretty much everywhere and done it all. It's good for heavy work and it's good for fine work. So it's just an all-around good knife. And yes, the biggest age factor is it's just smoother than it used to be. There's no grit. We'll talk about what you can hear in terms of grit in the unlock. The opening is smooth, the lockup is smooth, the unlock is smooth. So it's just a very handy knife for me to use, even now with my injury. Yeah, don't have quite the dexterity to do some of the things I used to be able to do with it, but yeah, it's still a really, really useful knife. Now, if you guys have been following my channel, you know that in 2020 I've had, well, more time on my hands, being mostly semi-isolated with a lot of access to the internet. Well, you know from my reviews I've done a lot of shopping. So, thinking about, well, if I love that knife so much and it's held up so well for such a long time, what's cold steel got out there today? Well, the first knife I chose, I actually had my eye on it for a while, and that would be the Ultimate Hunter. Now, unlike the American Lawman, as I mentioned, it's not hollow ground. It's a flat ground, saber ground edge. Size. The American Lawman has a 3¼ inch blade. This one's a 3½, but it's a similar width. It's a 1 inch wide blade, but you'll see on this one, it's a lot straighter, more parallel profile. So different blade shape, and obviously there's more steel in the blade. So a little bit more blade heavy, feels more solid. The scales, though, the shape of the grip is very different, and this is where I did the modification to it. It has a little bit of a finger choil out here. I slightly rounded it. Again, most of that was for safety because, yes, this one would close just enough on my finger to give me a nick. So a little bit more rounding right there at the base of the blade made that just a little bit smoother, gave me a little bit more safety room, no more problems. What else did I do to it? Now, obviously no finish to strip off the blade. The scales don't have the checkering. It's kind of a flat G10, but it's definitely grippy enough to be functional. There's nothing wrong with that. You'll notice, though, that there's a lot more shape and contour. The sides are curved, and you've got this nice little finger groove here. All right, I really like that. It feels very comfortable. But one thing I did do, if you, again, you see this online, this one goes for about $100, maybe 100 and change. So about $10 more expensive than the other one, depending on sales and where you get it from. You'll notice that on the original, this line here it's straight across. There's no finger choil there. Now, I didn't just do that for comfort. Some knives I get with thumb studs, injury or no injury, I have some issues with scale clearance. If there's not enough room for me to get my thumb behind that stud, in other words, the scale gets in my way, I can't quickly and easily get my thumb on the stud positively enough to get the knife open. The other thing that might happen on certain knife designs is whatever the shape here is, the guard, whatever you want to call it, that might actually wind up in the way of the path of the stud with my thumb on it, and I'll snag. Well, this doesn't do that. But yeah, there just wasn't enough clearance. That stud was way too close to the scale. Now again, thankfully it's G10, very shapeable, and there's no metal liners right up to the edge of that, so it gave me some room to take that down a little bit, gives me a little bit more comfortable choil there, depending on how I'm gripping the knife, and now there's plenty of clearance for me to get it open. Okay, it's a little bit harder to open than the American Lawman, but part of that's because it's newer and a little bit stiffer. Same thing with the closure. You might even hear this. You hear more clicking and scraping, just a little bit. Yeah. But again, the Lawman had that issue. It's a little bit stiffer to close and just a little bit rougher. Over time, I suspect this is going to smooth up just fine like the other one and hold up just as well as the other one. It's a solid knife. It's comfortable. Gets in and out of the pocket fairly easy. It's a little thicker, you know, so that's a little bit different for carry, but for me, it feels better in hand. So pretty good choice. But was I done shopping? Let's talk about everyday carry. I've carried both of these knives that I've showed you, and like I said, I've had the American Lawman for a long time. But the question everybody asks, all right, Mike, what's in your pocket right now? Well, yes, it is a cold steel triad knife. And it is the Kiradashi. Actually, this is my small carry for fine work. But people who know me know that I've pretty much got knives in pretty much every pocket of everything I wear. What's in my pocket right now? The AD10. Which is indeed bigger than the other two. The American Lawman, 3¼ inch blade, about 1 inch wide. Ultimate Hunter, 3½ inch blade, still about 1 inch wide, and again, not hollow ground, so it's a beefier blade. Yeah, this one is 3 7/8, so a little bit longer, but width, not 1 inch, but 1 3/8 inch. So yeah, it's a beefier beast. And again, being not hollow ground, flat ground, saber ground, yeah, it's got a lot of weight and mass in it. Also, you'll notice, unlike the other two, yeah, you got the same kind of rounded, very ergonomic G10 scales with that kind of smooth but still very grippy finish to it. But full stainless liners. Okay. Have I made any modifications to this knife? No. No reshaping required. Feels really good. It's beefier, definitely thicker, got more girth. I mean, not just wider in the blade, but that also means wider in the grip. Yeah, just feels great. Now, why did I specifically get this one? Well, there are two reasons that I want to acknowledge. One, the input I got from my YouTube friends. Some of you guys made some really great recommendations for this knife, so thank you. And again, I can't express how much I appreciate our exchanges in the comments. Okay, keep that stuff coming. It's really, really meaningful to me. Thank you. The other thing that inspired me to get this was I actually had my eye for the longest time on a totally different knife, and that was a zero tolerance knife. Now, I do have a zero tolerance knife that I will review separately, and it's a beefy beast, but the one I had my eye on for a long time and never pulled the trigger on, I was inspired to get my hands on because, okay, I'm dating myself, and my love of Leroy Jethro Gibbs from NCIS, right? He carried a zero tolerance 300, I think it was, with the tiger stripe finish. I just never bought it. It was kind of expensive, and I had a couple of doubts about, you know, whether I should spend the money on it. And since then, it's kind of been discontinued, and they scaled it down to, I think it's called the 350 or 357, something like that. It's a little bit smaller, G10 scales, different design. So I was thinking about getting that one, and then, well, 2020, 2021, as I'm shopping, I can't comment on this personally, but I did see some dips in the reviews, that there were some concerns with quality control, specifically the liner lock and certain other things about the fit and finish in certain examples, which may or may not have been counterfeit. I don't know. But that made me hesitate enough to consider a knife of very similar proportions, very similar price. You're talking $125, $135. So of the three I'm showing you, this is the most expensive one. 90-something, 100-something, 125, 135 something. Is it worth that extra money? I would say definitely so. As you can see, it is the one that's in my pocket right now. What are some of the other differences? Well, like I said, I haven't had to make any changes to the shape of the grip. There is plenty of clearance for that thumb stud for me. So either hand works really well. Yes, there's still a little bit of grit and stiffness in the release. I think it's a little bit smoother than the Hunter. Just a little. Doesn't close on my finger. It's got enough of a finger choil up there to give me some protection. It does have some jimping on the back of the blade and this little swedge here in the drop point. That gives it just a little bit more, I think, aesthetic appeal. I don't know how functional that is. It's not a back edge or anything. But yeah, the stronger liners, really, I mean, check out the beef in the pocket clip. Yeah, it's a beefy pocket clip. It's bigger, but it doesn't carry all that bigger than the Hunter does. So, like, this is the one I've had in my pocket for a couple of months now, and it's been just fine. And it's very useful, but it's a big, heavy-duty, heavy-use knife. They actually have this little hole here. You can barely see it, kind of in where the finger guard would be. That's actually a hole that you could theoretically stick a pin through to give it extra sturdiness in the lock so it won't accidentally close, but I can't imagine what you'd have to do to this knife to make it close accidentally. The triads are just really, impressively strong. And yeah, they're a little stiff and gritty in the beginning, but if my American Lawman is any example, they smooth up. They don't weaken, they don't get sloppy, but yeah, they just kind of get smoother and more comfortable over time. Now, as I said, the story is a little bit different on some of the smaller examples, some of them, not all of them. And I'll cover those in separate reviews. But you post, through the review, I'll post some pictures of these things side by side. Yeah, right now, this one is just slightly ahead of the rest of the pack in terms of being my overall favorite. But then again, maybe I'm not done shopping. So potentially to be continued. Until then, I hope this was useful information, comparison, contrast. If you own any of these knives, let me know what you think about them in the comments. If you're thinking about getting any of these knives, I'm happy to answer any of your questions. And as always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you back for more.